Hello again, this is Ron Waters. I'm your host of Veterans Voice. Today we have a special guest with us. It's a Colonel Glenn Puckett. We're going to be talking to him in a minute. He was in occupied Japan after World War II. Very interesting story, so we'll be right back. All right, welcome to Veterans Voice. We're going to talk to Colonel Glenn Puckett today, and he was in the U.S. Army, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In World War II.
Yes, sir.
We're so glad that you come on the program today because we got a lot of interesting questions to ask you, and I'm sure you've got a lot of interesting answers.
I'll be glad to. Do
All
my
right.
best.
Well, you served, from what time did you serve?
I went in the Army in February 1945, and I was discharged December the 6th, 1946.
So the war was still going on, World War II.
When I went in, it was.
When you went in.
Both Germany and Japan.
Yeah. So what happened in your training? What were you being trained for?
Well, I went in at trained at Camp Walters, Texas. That's near Mineral Wells. It was an IRTC training. That's Infantry Replacement Training Center. And I was trained in Dog Company, which is a weapon company. The rifle companies carried the light machine gun, the air-cooled, and the 60 millimeter mortar. I was in a weapons company, and we carried the water-cooled machine gun. It's a 30 caliber, but it's water-cooled, and we used the 81 millimeter mortar.
81 millimeter, that's big. So you were being trained with that weapon, and your MOS was, what do they call it, your specialty?
Well, my MOS, when I graduated training, my MOS was specially 812. That's a water-cooled gunner. So as I finished my training, I was a graduate of the water-cooled gunner.
Now, is that a land gun, or is that
It's a land gun. It weighs 96 pounds.
Weighs 96 pounds.
With a tripod and full of water.
That's pretty heavy. Did it take two fellas to
Took
operate?
3 people. It was supposed to take 3 people.
3 people.
I carried the gun. You could just unlatch it. And another man brought the tripod, and another man brought the water can and ammunition.
Yeah.
I carried that one day in basic training.
Yeah.
They had us practicing being short of help. They told us we were, in that business, we were short of help a lot of times. So I carried the gun. I just take the tripod and hang it over my back, and Reed would bring my ammunition and my water can, and I carried it all day, put it in action 6 different times, taking a hill a mile away. That was our problem.
Yeah.
And that gun fires 250 rounds per minute.
Wow, that's a lot, especially as big as they are. Now, when you finished your basic, where were you stationed at the time?
Camp Walters, Texas.
Camp Walters, Texas, and then you went from there where?
I went from Camp Walters to Camp Maxey.
Camp Maxey.
Because the Congress had passed a law that a soldier had to be in the Army 6 months or be 19. And I was still 18, and I went to Camp Maxey.
So you were drafted, is that correct?
I was drafted.
Yeah.
I got my greeting from President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And I went to Camp Maxey for 4 weeks advanced training.
Yeah.
And now infantry basic, I was trained, of course I fired the M1 rifle. I fired the bazooka, and I fired the water-cooled machine gun. We threw hand grenades, and we practiced everything that a foot soldier used, or foot soldier, or infantry.
That M1 was a good rifle, wasn't it? I trained with some of it.
M1 was the best rifle in the war.
Yeah. We trained with it for 3 or 4 weeks in ITR training after our boot camp in the Marine Corps. And I thought that was an excellent gun. It was really tough.
It's tough. when we would have that bayonet practice with that, and they told us that in basics that you cannot break this gun.
I believe it.
Well, we all tried to.
Yeah.
And you'd be doing the bayonet practice,
Yeah.
and they'd jump something out in front of you, and I'd hit that tree.
Yeah.
I was trying to break it. I never did break it.
No.
Never hurt it.
We would break our fall with it when we were dropping to the ground. So now you mentioned earlier to me that you had you went across the pond, is what we call it. You ended up in the Philippines for a little while.
Yes, sir. That's where I went to the Philippines first.
Mm-hmm.
See, I was on a troop train. My basic training, advanced training was over. I was on a troop train to the West Coast.
Uh-huh.
I was going across the state of Montana, and our train stopped, and we got word that they had dropped an atomic bomb that killed the whole city.
Now what?
That was August the 6th.
August the 6th of 1946, wasn't it?
1945.
1945. Yeah.
And then we went on down and went to Portland, Oregon, and I got on a ship, the USS Bolivar. It was an APA-34. It was a attack ship. We had 21 landing barges, and 1,800 of us, all 18 years old, or 18 and 19
Wow.
years old.
Yeah.
And we rode that ship for 30 days, and we
Just
landed.
to get to the Philippines.
We landed in Leyte.
Leyte.
Now the island of Leyte is 1,000 miles below Manila.
Oh, okay.
It's way down. I landed at the beach where General MacArthur first landed when he returned.
And he returned.
And announced to the Filipinos that he had returned.
You told me earlier about during that time that while he was still away out of the country, you know, because he told him he would return, that they were flying over dropping bubble gum instead of bombs.
See, General MacArthur, when the Japanese captured the Philippines, General MacArthur and General Wainwright held out on the island of Corregidor.
Uh-huh.
And the president ordered MacArthur to leave the Corregidor and go to Australia.
Yeah.
And he gave General Wainwright permission. Now, I have talked to two sailors that tied up his PT boat, and when they loaded MacArthur and his mistress and her two children, this sailor got on, and MacArthur made him and that other sailor get off and stay on the Corregidor.
Oh.
So he got captured with General Wainwright.
Oh, I didn't know that.
General Wainwright, he walked the Globe March down Taft Avenue in Manila. And Admiral General Hama he had to pass in review and turn his head to General Hama as they passed down Taft Avenue in Manila.
Who was General Hama?
That's General Hama was a general that fought the Battle of the Philippines for the Japanese.
Oh, for the Japanese.
The Japanese carried him back to Tokyo and discharged him. They said he was not a good general because it took him too long to take the Philippines.
Oh.
He was responsible for the Bataan Death March.
Yeah.
You know, they marched 70,000, 70 miles without water. If they went over to that spring to get water, the guard killed them. I've got to talk to a man that did that march.
Yeah.
He said it was 300 bodies or more.
Wow.
But that spring when he walked past it. After the war, we looked up General Hama and hung him.
And hung him, yeah.
We had a trial, tribunal trial,
Yeah.
and we hung him.
Yeah. Well, I'd say he deserved it. Now, you eventually ended up in occupied Japan, right?
Yes, sir. I stayed in the Philippines. I got out of the infantry because they didn't need, and I drove a truck, a quartermaster, unloading ships for 7 or 8 months. And then they put me, they consolidated the truck company, and I was sent out to the replacement center and selected for an office job in the Air Force. I was in Fort William McKinley in Manila with a headquarters of the Air Force called Paducah.
Uh-huh.
And then when they moved Paducah to Tokyo, I went with them to Tokyo and stayed there till I come home.
Now, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, there was no Air Force, only Army Air Force until after World War II. Is that correct?
Well, it was known as the Air Corps.
The Air Corps.
At the beginning of the war.
Yeah.
And then they called it the Army Air Force.
Army Air Force, yeah.
Sometime during the war,
yeah.
It was called the Army Air Force.
Yeah, but then later they changed it to just Air Force.
Air Force,
I think that was before the Korean War, wasn't it?
I suppose. I don't know exact on that.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know that the Air Force wasn't always the Air Force. It was the Army Air Force first.
I'm a member of the Confederate Commemorative Air Force, and that's the same boys and the same airplanes that made the movie Pearl Harbor.
Oh, yeah.
And if you ever get a chance, you go see a CAP show. I've been 18 times to Midland, Texas.
Midland, Texas.
And they reenact the bombing of Pearl Harbor with a concussion. It shakes the windows and rattles the windows and balls of fire. It is a show to see.
You know, do you think they might have a show like that on the internet to put one of them shows on?
I would think so.
Yeah, so we'll have to look that up.
You can see it locally or maybe Nashville if you watch.
Yeah, okay. Now that you were telling me earlier about you knew quite some people that were involved in the dropping of the atomic bomb on Japan, and the Enola Gay, you mentioned that's the one that carried Fat Man.
Well, the Enola Gay was Paul Tibbets was the pilot.
Paul Tibbets. And
he named his B-29 after his mother, Enola Gay.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's where the
And now the atomic bomb is about the size. That was a little boy that he dropped. That's about the size of a garbage can, 9 foot long. And that's what Paul Tibbets dropped on Hiroshima.
Oh, okay.
That's on August 6, 1945.
1945.
Now, the Fat Man, it's like a big beer barrel. It's fatter in the middle than a beer barrel. Yeah. It was painted yellow, and it was dropped on Nagasaki.
Nagasaki, yeah.
August the 9th. And the airplane name was Boxcar, but I have forgot the name of the pilot. But now that pilot went crazy, lost his mind, thought a million Japs was after him, and he died about a year after the war.
Yeah. Now they dropped those bombs and they actually exploded several feet in the air, wasn't it?
They dropped it. They exploded the bomb 2,000 feet above the ground.
2,000 feet, yeah. It's amazing the damage they did. You know,
it burned over 5 miles circumference.
5 miles.
Diameter.
Yeah. I think the first one killed over 180,000 people.
Probably so.
I think it was. But so you mentioned the Commemorative Air Force, which it's a Civil Air Patrol, is it?
I belong to Civil Air Patrol. That's a civil group.
Okay.
At our hometown of Fulton, Kentucky. But Commemorative Air Force, it originally was named Confederate Air Force when I joined in 1983. But that wasn't politically right. We had to change our name, and it's Commemorative Air Force. Headquarters being in Midland. Just 2 years ago, they moved the headquarters. The headquarters is not in Midland. It's in Dallas, Texas today.
Texas. Okay.
There will be an air show with Tora Tora in Dallas, Texas sometime this year.
We had a veteran on here a couple months ago. He was on some of the battleships in the Vietnam War, but his daddy and uncle were in World War II, and one of them, forget which one, I think it was his uncle was on that Oklahoma, and when it was bombed in Pearl Harbor at the time, in Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 41. And then his uncle, or his daddy, I forget how it is, but he was on one of the ships that were sunk in Okinawa, later on in another battle. But he said that by the time that he was in Vietnam, one of the ships landed in Pearl Harbor, and they were recreating that movie Tora Tora, and dropping fake bombs and with the World War II planes, you know. But here it was, you know, in the '60s they were doing that. So he said he got to see that firsthand.
I might add there, if during the time they were making that movie Pearl Harbor, it was one of these boys, the Tora Tora group. He was watching this other airplane, and he hung his wing on a palm tree, turned him upside down. He landed on the runway, upside down, and it was on fire. But the people were right there, foamed him in less than a minute. I know that man, his name was Gene.
Yeah.
It didn't hurt him. They foamed him. He got out, and he was back out in the airport next week. But he turned his airplane upside down during the movie. They didn't show that in the movie, but that happened. His name was Gene.
Yeah. You know, there's a lot of strange things that happen in a war zone, things that you just can't explain, you know. I know one of the fellas, the night we got hit pretty hard by 140 millimeter rockets there on Marble Mountain and near Da Nang. It was just a flat beachhead, you know, just sand. And, but there was the biggest helicopter squadron in South Vietnam at the time, MAB-16. But the rockets, the wind somehow carried them over. They were after the helicopters, but they carried them over to the living quarters. Now, one of the strangest things that happened that night is two fellows traded places. One of them that was supposed to have been on outer perimeter guard duty, he traded places with another fellow, so he was out on outer perimeter in guard duty. So the fellow that was supposed to be there, he was in the rack sleeping, and he got it that night. And one of them rounds landed on him that night. And so kind of strange, you know, some strange things happened. The only dud on base was the closest one to our living quarters. He just stuck in the sand out of 80-some rounds that hit. Strange things, you know, that you can't explain like that happen, you know. So I'm sure you probably heard a lot of stories like that.
Yes, sir.
So
I can briefly, during the Belgian Bulge, I had a cousin that was on the absolute front line, and he lay behind his gun and fired while the company moved out. And he said he would stay there till he got killed, but his gun jammed, and he ran and got away. He was decorated. He told me, he said, there's no such thing as bravery.
Yeah. You do what you have to do.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
He said, you just get caught in a situation,
yeah,
and you have to do what you want to have to do.
Yeah.
Now, I spent many a duck in a duck blind, many a days with a man in the 44th Infantry in Europe. His company held the record for the number of days on the front line. Yeah. He landed at Le Havre and never was relieved till the war was over.
Yeah.
In France. Well, I mean, down in Belgium.
Yeah.
I'd like to tell him. Yeah. His name was Neil McAllister.
William McAllister?
Neil McAllister.
Neil McAllister. So you knew him well.
He was my brother-in-law's brother. I spent lots of duck in a duck blind, and he talked. We drank a little refreshments, and he'd tell me stories all day long. He'd talk about it.
He probably did talk about it to everybody.
He told me when he was down in Austria, this young German soldier came out with his hands up.
Yeah.
Surrendered to him. He said he wasn't over 16.
Yeah.
And he knew the war was near the end.
Yeah.
He carried him home. Had him pull off his uniform.
Yeah.
And burn it.
Yeah.
And he left him with his wife.
No. Well, ain't that something? You know, a lot of strange things happen, you know, that when war like that is going on, you know, your enemy is not always your enemy. They're just there because they were put there by their commanders, and a lot of times just obeying commands, you know. And but yeah, there was a lot of things that happened like that toward the end of World War II. A lot of the Germans, you know, they were really young. They started putting in the young fellas.
At my hometown community center, Water Valley, it was a boy brought a child's helmet there. It was a German helmet, and it wasn't big enough for a 10-year-old.
Really? Yeah, yeah. This, you know, we've seen a lot of strange things like that in Vietnam. You know, there'd be just kids that you wouldn't expect, you know, them to do any harm, but you'd be walking down the road, you know, and a bunch of kids come out of the villages, and they want candy. But while several of them are asking for candy, one of them is slipping off your wristwatch, and you're not even noticing it, you know, or they're picking in your pocket or something. But they blew up a couple of guards at a guard shack one day, just kids, with a grenade, doing the same thing, you know, asking for candy as the guards. Guards are saying, "Well, we don't have it." And then one of them lob in a hand grenade. You know, a lot of strange things like that happen. You know, that you don't want to like to think about. You know, but
well, I understand that one man that for killing some children and women, but he said if you just had little children kill your buddy,
yeah,
the little children were your enemies too.
Yeah,
and you had to understand that.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of things happened that a lot of the military that were there, and I know the guys in Afghanistan and Iraq can tell you a lot of stories too, like that.
Bound to hell.
Yeah. So
I might mention 2 points in Tokyo, in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I had a rest camp in Nikko, Japan. That's the largest shrine
Mm-hmm.
in the Empire of Japan. And I had 8-day leave there. But also the favorite beautiful mountain, Mount Fujiyama.
Mm-hmm.
I climbed that mountain in August of 1946.
Well, that's a big mountain.
Beautiful, most perfect shape.
Now, how were the people there? Were they treating
you?
you?
Very, in Japan, very humble, very nice.
Yeah. So we hear stories, you know, that they were all behind their emperor, you know, in World War II, but a lot of them weren't, were they? They were just wanting to just live, you know, just have peace. But
well, you see, the way I saw the Japanese, it wasn't the way I saw them after Pearl Harbor, but after living with them for 9 months,
yeah,
they were the boys, men, went into the Army just like I did.
Yeah.
It wasn't their choice to go to the Philippines and carry a rifle.
Right.
Just like it wasn't mine and your choice.
Right.
Somebody sent us.
Somebody sent us. Yep. Yeah, I was one of the old fellas. I was 19 when I got drafted, and by the time I got to Vietnam, I was 20, and 4 months later I was 21. So I spent my 21st birthday walking guard duty in the rain. So
well, I had my 19th birthday in Manila, and I had my 20th birthday in Tokyo.
So I was considered an old fella. You know. There was a lot of young fellas over there. Most of them were younger than me. But occupied Japan, we hear people talk about occupied Japan. So you were there in 1946?
46.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, our B-29s dropped phosphorus bombs. There was a naval base called Yokosuka. And then right up the coast there's Yokohama. And then there's Tokyo. You're talking about at the most maybe 50 miles. And it was all machine gun factories, tank factories. It was like our Pittsburgh and Detroit.
Yeah.
Their buildings were wood.
Yeah.
We've dropped down, firebombed that one night and burned that whole 50 miles.
Wow.
They told us the wind was 45 miles an hour that night.
Oh, and they just carried it.
And they couldn't put it out.
Yeah.
It killed more people than the atomic bomb.
Wow.
And Lee May was in charge of the Air Force. He never reported it.
Never reported it, huh?
Because they're afraid that he might be charged with killing innocent people.
Oh, yeah.
But that really wasn't
It wasn't their intention.
No,
It's just that the wind carried it.
But on the other hand, some of those houses had little machine shops.
Yeah.
They were making gun parts in lots of those houses. So that was a legitimate bombing.
Yeah, they had emptied some of their factories because they were targets, and a lot of the manufacturing and stuff went on in people's homes.
And yes, it did.
Yeah. So.
Well, let nobody say using the atomic bomb was bad.
Yeah.
Because it saved millions of Japanese and Americans, and I'd probably be one of them if he hadn't dropped it.
Well, my father-in-law, he was in occupied Japan, 1946, so probably saved his life too, you know, because he was a paratrooper. He jumped, you know, and then after the war was over, they turned him into a cook.
Well, I'll say.
But he was still in occupied Japan for a little while. So
I have a book on Tokyo, 1945, and I've driven the trip from Tokyo to Yokohama many times, and in that book, it's nothing but smokestacks.
Yeah.
Their buildings were wood.
Yeah.
And the smokestack was, of course, concrete or brick. Yeah. And there was nothing but smokestacks.
Just see nothing but smokestacks, huh?
No, I got there early enough in '46, and I, being a truck driver, they had me drive to Yokohama and pick up some soldiers off of the ship. And the bulldozers had just cleaned the road enough. It had wide places from passing every once in a while, but for the most part, it was just a one-way road.
Yeah.
It was rubble. That's what I saw.
Yeah. Well, we know the Japanese were very industrious people, and they, of course, our country helped rebuild a lot of that damage that was done and everything. So
I understand. We rebuilt their houses that we burned.
I heard stories where the sailors would dump their trash in the ocean when they were docked in the Tokyo Bay, and then the Japanese divers would dive down and get the tin, get the metal, and they'd make radios and stuff out of them. You know, they'd sold them back to us. So, but some of those early cars that came from Japan were actually mashed together with, you know, the tin on the roof. You know, so but they were very industrious people. So we're going to wrap this up here, Glenn, and we want to thank you today for coming on the show and sharing your stories with us.
Sure, it's my pleasure.
And we hope that you can come back sometime.
Thank you kindly.
We're sure glad that we were able to meet you the other day. I met you at the Veterans Hospital at Paducah. Marion. I met you at Marion, yeah. So we're glad you could come on the show today. So we're going to wrap this up, and we just hope you keep tuning in at Veterans Voice, and we'll see you next time. And thank you for watching.